After reading Jurgensen's book in May 1973, I became aware of the sudden onset on my tapes of voices using identities to be found throughout Jurgensen's book. One of his chief communicators was Lena, an exuberant female who appeared to be in charge of his entire operation. She commonly addressed him as Freddy, Frederisko, Friedel, and other variations on Friedrich. Here is a Lena type voice appearing on the airband in my location in 1973. Firstly, a female voice says, "I've just been speaking to the Freddy." Note the Freddy, the German usage. And then, following that, a female voice, probably Lena again, "He's my true Freddy. He's my true Freddy." Now, though less distinctly, in the same period, a voice, "We belong to Friedrich, both of us." Now, during the course of the same experiment, a female voice came over, using a shortened mode of expression, saying, "We are really internatio." She means, of course, we are really international. Now, jumping ahead a couple of years, a female singing voice expresses the same international sentiments. "I am joined zu vielen Länder." That's half English, half German. Vielen Länder, which should really be vielen Ländern, means many countries. So we have, "I am joined to many countries." In other words, I'm international. Dr. Raudiver died in September 1974, and that last voice was received in July 1975, interrupting a long negative period when unknown factors continued to hinder voice reception. On this day, this last singing voice was received, and in the same experiment in my Yorkshire location, other voices came through, indicating that the contact was indeed a Raudiver group. My suspicions were aroused by the following voice, where the female continues to sing. Now she sings Uppsal or Uppsala Sonnenkontest. Now the Swedish town of Uppsala figures prominently in Raudiver's life. He spent many years there before moving to Bad Krotzingen. His wife, Frau Dr. Zenta Morina Raudiver, a brilliant novelist and philologist, was educated there, and her secretary, Margarita Petrowski, died in Uppsala and is buried there. Readers of Breakthrough will know that Margarita was a convincing communicator via the EVP to Raudive. Again and again in his voice communications, the name Uppsala is mentioned. What is not generally known, and as far as I know was never mentioned by Raudive, was that old Uppsala was a centre of pilgrimage in pre-Christian times, a holy shrine and temple to the old gods, probably a sun religion. The voice Uppsal Sonnenkantes, Sonnen, German for the sun, probably refers to a priestess of the old religion. Here is the voice, but it was followed by other voices decisively showing a contact with Raudive, or Costa, as he liked to be called. Firstly, Uppsal Sonnenkantes. The next few moments brought further confirmation of this contact. The voice continues, "Only Sonia will make it." The Latvian parapsychologist Sonja Lipina made a pact with Raudive before she died to return by some means. Sonja Lipina was a student of the natural sciences and in her latter years a parapsychologist, but she died in 1958, before the onset of the electronic voice phenomenon. Raudive made similar pacts with 3 other people, but Sonia, on my tapes in 1975, proudly announces, "Only Sonia will make it." Notice the odd use of the expression "will make it." That's more an Americanism. Remarkable confirmation was to follow that same afternoon in Hull. A male voice, probably Raudive's, says, "Ach, wie nice, Costa." Costa being his constant mode of address and endearment used by many communicators. Again, the mixture of English and German. But more was to follow. A male voice continued, "You shall look at Raymond," that's the German pronunciation of Raymond, "for I. You shall look at Raymond for I." At the time, I was a little confused because I'd had some eye trouble. But the meaning, within the context of the previous voices, is evidently, "You should expect my communications through Raymond." That is myself. At that time, the German EVP Association, under Herr Köbeler and Frau Buschbeck, was asking experimenters to look out for possible contacts with Raudive, whose death had shaken the EVP world the previous September. However, I was not aware of their intense efforts in this direction until much later, when I was sent a bulletin from Dusseldorf. Realizing that these voices were in some way outstanding, I lodged copies with Spencer Wilson and Richard Sheargold of the SPR on the 30th of July, 1975, but at that time I failed to realize the significance of the reference to the Sun Contessa and to Sonia. Here now are the 2 male voices following the previous singing voices. Number 1, "Ach, wie nice, Costa," and number 2, "You should look at Raymond for I."
Ach, wie nice, Costa. Ach, wie nice, Costa. Ach, wie nice, Costa. Ach, далее. Курсант. Слушай уроки, давай, мой фарай. 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 Поиграли. Курсант.
Although I realized at the time, on that summer afternoon in Hull, in 1975, that paranormal results had come through, I knew nothing at that moment about Uppsala's importance as a pre-Christian center, nor about the survival pact between Raudive and Sonja Lipena. The voice entities show signs of careful planning in their planting of survival evidence, and obscure references at the time are often clarified months and even years later. The following dramatic instance was initiated by a voice on the 31st of May 1972, which I put on ice, was reopened in July and August 1974, when I forwarded copies of the voice to Spencer Wilson, Richard Sheargold, and Peter Bander, and came to unhappy and untimely fruition when on September the 2nd, 1974, only a few weeks later, without warning, during an afternoon nap, Constantine Raudive passed away. Shortly after a successful seminar on a special instance concerning the modulation of paranormal voices onto normal sounds. A Germanic voice, speaking in a stilted, rather unusual, but nevertheless correct German, says Eichenstark Raudive zum Grabmals. Eichenstark means strong like an oak. Raudive is heavily accented, possibly a Baltic pronunciation. Zum Grabmals means towards the tomb. This can be understood in two senses. Firstly, Raudive worked with determination on the survival question. Secondly, he was approaching his own passing. It was curious that towards the end of June 1974, I felt impelled to circularize this voice. Here's the example. The next voice was highly evidential to me. It arrived towards the end of 1973. Having no contact with Friedrich Jürgensen, I had no means of knowing that Professor Bender, together with a German TV team, had visited him in Sweden to obtain material for a TV program. This was in the summer of 73, a few months before I received the voice. I filed it away, put it on ice. But a year later, I received a tape from Germany of the actual TV transmission. I then realized the significance of the voice, which had said Kersten, Deutschen by Frederick. Kersten, Germans with or visiting Frederick. Now Felix Kersten, a famous masseur and Himmler's personal physiotherapist during the war, had picked up the threads of his acquaintance with Jürgensen in the post-war years, but had died sometime in the 50s. Jürgensen, via the EVP, commenced to receive a strong contact with Kersten, who proceeded to transmit his voice with evidential matter via the electronic bridge between the two worlds. Clearly and rhythmically, my communicator said Kersten, Deutschen by Frederick. Kersten, Germans with Frederick. Note the variation on Friedrich. Received on my usual frequency during a routine experiment, not appreciated for its evidential nature at the time, I regard this as a genuine and vital contact with the invisible group working with and through Friedrich Jürgensen.
Очень большой друг. 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 Очень большой друг.
The conditions making dialogue possible with the voice entities are rare and evidently governed by very finely balanced factors. An opportunity was missed in late 1973 when I carried out an experiment but was interrupted by a business visitor. So I switched the monitor off but allowed the recording to run on. Amongst voices found on the tape on playback was one pleading, "Please, will you say something?" A little later, evidently under considerable stress and difficulty in holding the condition, a voice complains, "Who shall ever be in this pressure? Who shall ever be in this pressure?" Seance room communicators in the past have often complained about the heavy and murky mental atmosphere of our plane. As readers of the Psychical Researcher will know, Friedrich Jürgensen has now developed his work to the point of dialogue with the voices and is about to publish an LP via Philips. The fluctuating and mostly negative conditions which have bedeviled me since February 1974 have not allowed much development along these lines. But an attempt at dialogue in the summer of '75 elicited a laconic reply, "Dead machines," in a resigned, heavily accented voice. This made me jump as it came over. Here is the sequence, where you will see that I'm using a radio microphone method and talking into thin air, which of course may not be as empty as we imagine.
Is there anyone there today? This is Wednesday, 15th of October, and this is Raymond asking his friends from the other side to come along and talk.
Yes, machine.
This is Wednesday, 15th of October, and this is Raymond asking his friends from the other side to come along and talk.
Yes, machine.
Reception of the voices in 1973 involved me in lengthy correspondence with other workers in the field and in endless discussions with my colleague locally as to the possible origin of the strange voices. Every theory was exhaustively analyzed. At the height of this activity, a voice came over, a sibilant, strangely hissing voice. These solutions are gossamers. Gossamers are filmy threads ejected by migratory spiders in the late summer. They're insubstantial and soon dissipated. The many theories of the parapsychologists are probably also wide of the mark, and this, I think, is the import of the voice.
Les solutions en consommation. 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 Les solutions en consommation.
A female voice, taking me back to a remote railway station in Upper Bavaria in 1943, says in a surprised tone of recognition, "So strange, remember you. I understand this girl perished in a concentration camp, but have no details." She continues on this recording in a rather scolding tone, but the language remains untranslated. I've found that linguists, mostly academic purists in their particular tongue, shy away from these polyglot utterances and cannot understand the reason for them. I say sometimes, forget the reason, just give me an opinion on the meaning. The reply, usually, get them to speak good English. An exchange along these lines with Richard Sheargold resulted in a strong voice. He'll never believe it till conquest of English. Here it is. A rhythmical male voice exclaims briefly, "We are dreams." There are indications that post-mortem states are states of mind and emotion, not involving bank balances or accumulation of material objects.
Dream. 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 Dream.
After another hectic bout of correspondence with parapsychologists, a clear voice confirms in German and English, doch, which means in German certainly, recording, and note the mispronunciation there, doch recording the Cosmosiamons, obviously denizens of the cosmos. So a free interpretation, certainly you're recording a cosmic race, Cosmosiamons. Why should they not give themselves a name? Everything in existence is named. The voice is clear, sharply defined against the static.
Rekordillinen kosmosjaaman. Rekordillinen kosmosjaaman. Rekordillinen kosmosjaaman. Rekordillinen kosmosjaaman. Rekordillinen kosmosjaaman.
My assistant, Miss Feuchter, herself a successful experimenter with microphone voices, received a clear voice in my absence using my apparatus. I was in a sub-office without a telephone 50 miles away at Scarborough. The voice shouts, "Busy with Scarborough, Cass away. I must," and then it sounds like I must be scarpering, but this bit isn't too definite. My name is often used by the entities, as was Rowdy's in his day, but there isn't enough space on this tape to give all the examples. Here's this voice. "Busy with Scarborough, Cass away." Then followed a remarkable voice. During the previous week or two, we'd been reading a book on the Indian saint and wonder worker Satya Sai Baba by Howard Murfitt. Sai Baba, so it seems, has conscious command of energies normally only released in the presence of mediums in deep trance. This book and its predecessor by Arthur Osborne make compelling reading. Following the Cass away voice, a loud resonant voice came in and said, "Listen, listen. Baba is slowly coming and teaches the world." Jurgensen, in his book Radio Link with the Dead, described these strung transmissions at full volume. Few people took any notice of him as they strained to get whisper voices by the microphone method. Here's this example. "Listen. Hoch Baba. Hi Baba, that's probably an exalted being. Hoch Baba is slowly coming and teaches the world."
Образцовый коммунистический глаз. Образцовый коммунистический глаз. Образцовый коммунистический глаз. Образцовый коммунистический глаз.
Whilst recording one afternoon, a crackle came over the mains onto the tape from a faulty fluorescent fitting outside my office. Quick as a flash came a voice comment, "It's the fluoresco. It's the fluoresco." Again, their language. Late 1973 was a time of crisis in the Middle East, and rumors of war and the energy crisis followed. Two voices sound a note of warning. Decembros is an evil struggle, and carefully with nerve gas. Whilst most people are concerned with the nuclear threat, the voices draw attention to the handling and transport of lethal gases.
Indicando a sus amigos allí. 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 Indicando a sus amigos allí.
Darfelijk Rood Navidad. Darfelijk Rood Navidad. Plaatsen de naboedaan. 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 Plaatsen de naboedaan.
Indicando a sus amigos allí. Indicando a sus amigos allí.
What I call the Georgescu voice is in evident distress. But the person is coached by some determined females. At the end of their drill, she gasps out the word evidence and announces herself as Emmy in a choked voice, and then says, "I'm in Georgescu," wherever that may be. Then her voice commands, "S-E, Emmy, say it." Emmy was a relative of mine who died of cancer. This is no robot voice, but a voice filled with emotion.
Una, O, H, M, U, significa fin, y, M, 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 T, una, O, H, M, U, significa fin, y, M, 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 T, M, T, M,
An emotional, possibly newly arrived personality called Emmy or Amy is taught by a group of determined females to utilize this means of communication with Earth. Rather sadly, and superimposing herself on a faint aircraft transmission, a female sings, after a few abortive attempts to get started, "Aus Mystisches," that's out of the mystical, or I suppose you could say the spirit world, "Du schließt mich aus," you close me out. Then the final word in English, busy. In my own case, I find it extremely difficult to concentrate on the voices with 3 offices to run in an exacting sphere of work. All voice experimenters encounter this difficulty, and only someone of independent means could afford all the time necessary to bring this work to real fruition. The singing mode of communication is interesting. My colleague and assistant is interested in homeopathy and the biochemic system of medicine. She was preparing some of the so-called Bach remedies, named after Edward Bach, a former London bacteriologist, who went over to herbs and flowers, potentized by floating on spring water in strong sunlight. A voice came through, a male voice singing in German, Bachwasser, Bach water. Bach is German for stream or brook, and, of course, the name. Again attempting to help someone with homeopathic remedies, a voice advised her, now try Schussler. This refers to the homeopathic potencies of tissue salts of Dr. Schussler of Oldenburg. A fine, deep voice, contrasting with the previous tenor. When all the circuits are open, our activities are open to their scrutiny, nor is any act forgotten or lost in time. This should give us pause to think. Here's a female with a fascinating voice. Here's Astauda. Now, rather sardonically and commenting on the talk about polyvoices and secret transmitters, a voice says doch, that's certainly, mono, poly, ASEAN. Of course, mono and poly are mutually contradictory.
Monopoly ASEAN. Monopoly ASEAN. Monopoly ASEAN. Monopoly ASEAN.
A male voice, he'll be ready to be a hero speaker, refers probably to me. In more concise English, it would be, probably, he'll stick his neck out when the time comes. A curious and sharp female warns, I take his energy, ich nehm ihm das stamina. It is forbidden to use it for healing. Medizin from it ist verboten. A rare mixture of English and German. Ich nehm ihm das stamina. Medizin from it is verboten. So, our functions appear to be sharply restricted and defined. During a blank period in the summer of 75, I recorded a voice similar to my own. In measured tones, the voice said, "This is the twin recorder of this researchers." Of course, it should have been these researchers. The twin recorder of this researcher. The twin recorder of this researcher. The twin recorder of this researcher. Recorder of this researcher. The twin recorder of this researcher. The twin recorder of this researcher. Trying out the medium wave around Jurgensen's frequency and sending out a thought to Spencer Wilson, who also experimented on a Thursday night, and expressing my wish out loud that he might get voices, I found on playback a resonant voice, Spencer Will. Many Germans use the medium wave, hoping the voices will utilize the interfrequency energies. An ancient fossilized piece of wood picked up on the beach below my flat is from an unknown wreck in Bridlington Bay. It adorns my mantelpiece and is an object of speculation and discussion by visitors and ourselves. I received a voice during a station pause after a news bulletin on a medium-wave West German transmitter. The word Hector is clearly spoken by a female. At the time, I couldn't connect it with anything. Several months later, I picked up a book, Shipwrecks off the Yorkshire coast, and found to my astonishment that the vessel Hector had foundered about a mile out in the bay, just south of Flamborough Head. That would be roughly opposite my residence, on the 10th of January, 1803. The voice source has access to hidden archives. Theosophists would call these the Akashic records.
Rundfunk und der Westdeutsche Rundfunk mit dem ersten Programm. Sie hörten Nachrichten, die Zeit 23 Uhr und 5 Minuten. Und der Westdeutsche Rundfunk mit dem ersten Programm. Sie hörten Nachrichten, die Zeit 23 Uhr und 5 Minuten.
Und nun laden wir Sie ein zu unserem Nachtkonzert. Zu Beginn spielt Claudio Arrau die Sonate C-Sul, quasi una fantasia, Opus 27, Nummer 2, die Mondscheinsonate von Ludwig van Beethoven.
Friedrich Jürgensen designated two classes of voice entity. Popsters, a crude term, who insert words like lightning between the words of a regular announcer, or in a song. And copyists, who by their own arcane and brilliant science modify the words of a speaker or singer. This ability, and the ability to affect terrestrial electronic circuitry, is a power held in reserve by a race closely monitoring our progress. On a deserted waveband, a voice breaks in. Copyist is the Melchior, and then, congratulating herself, the word brav, which is German for excellent or very good. Melchior is a word which took me a long time to locate in the public library. It's Swedish and means to render possible. I've no knowledge of Scandinavian languages at all. This word is a nightmare to spell. Copyist is entirely a Jürgensen term. Ist die is German for is thee. Mögliggöra is Swedish, meaning to render possible, so the copyists have made this possible. These technical entities described in Jürgensen's Radio Link with the Dead. She finishes up after a pause by singing brav, which is German for excellent. A recent voice on a deserted waveband. A male voice this time, saying cryptically, height very bad, till 1907. What on earth did he mean? 48 hours later, I picked up Richard Soodholter's massive biography of Bix, the legendary cornetist and, as a child, prodigal pianist. One day in 1907, at the age of 4, he entered the Beiderbecke parlour, stretched up on tiptoe, just managed to reach the keyboard, and picked out a simple melody on the piano. Height very bad, bis zu 1907. Bis zu means until.
Height very bad. Bis to 1907. Height very bad. Bis to 1907. Height very bad. Bis to 1907. Height very bad.
Well, Bix, of course, was of German ancestry, though I hardly think he would speak with a German accent himself. However, here's something not paranormal. Here's Bix playing a few bars, coming across 50 years. Notice, of course, in that last one, the polyglot usage. Height very bad, bis zu 1907. It's a pity that hundreds of other good voice examples must remain unexpressed on this tape and locked away in my collection. It is an almost impossible task, deciding which to include or which to exclude in this kind of a tape. Had my peak period persisted, extended into 1974-75, a staggering total of over 20,000 voices was a distinct possibility. But it is doubtful if any investigator can handle this amount of input. Finally, a girl's voice calls only for Daddy. Daddy only dreams of us, or for us, tries to. There was a daughter, stillborn in 1947. Whilst selecting that last voice from my stock, I came across a triumphant singing voice, possibly Sonia Lipina again, because she uses the same expression, I've made it. She sings enthusiastically, Ray Cass, I've made it. Voices recorded 2 or even 3 years ago and disregarded or put on ice at the time suddenly assume real significance. Here it is, Ray Cass, I've made it. Researchers should carefully note the following voice. Raymond, C. Wir haben Schallplatten. Raymond, C. We use recordings. This describes a technical process. The entities obviously have a technology of their own.
Without delay of this concern without delay of this details for all details for all concern without delay of this details for all details for all concern without delay of this.
Notice that cryptic and surprising statement. Concerned, without delay, publish. Also, send details to Waldheim. The listener to this tape will have had the opportunity to obtain the message of instructions from the pen of the late Bill Welsh. From my own experience, I endorse everything or nearly everything he said. Bill relates facts, not wishful thinking, and as a practical experimenter myself, I realize the amount of midnight oil he must have burned and the sacrifices he must have made. His passing is a great loss to us, but a gain to the invisible groups working to strengthen the contact. This is a difficult and exacting field within parapsychology, which will tax your patience and demand endurance and staying power. It is, however, of great, even crucial importance to the future of mankind. I will add some comments to Bill Welsh's excellent summary. I personally have not hesitated to use ordinary cassette recorders with one speed only. The communicators will readily adapt to this seeming limitation. Recently, I bought a cassette machine with variable playback speed, plus or minus 10%, but I rarely have to use this facility. When I established my contact on VHF FM with the results you've listened to on this tape, my microphone voices ceased. Nevertheless, to all new experimenters, I would recommend the latter method. Equip your machine, whether it's a reel-to-reel recorder or a cassette recorder, with the best microphone you can afford, matching the input impedance. Experiment alone in your room or in a group. Address yourself verbally to the unseen intelligences, even though you may think this is absurd. For a while, leave the world of ordinary reality aside, like Castaneda, and seek an inner, unseen, quiet contact. Don't be tense. Walk about your study if you like, sort papers, tidy up. The entities sometimes utilize ambient sound and restructure it in a surprising way. Or, if you prefer, you can remain as silent as a Trappist monk. Your first voice will appear unexpectedly anyway, and may not obey the rules. Make a copy on another machine. Extract and repeat it. Keep an open mind, but expect fluctuations, delays, and dramatic episodes. 1,000 experimenters in West Germany hitch their tape recorders to a radio and tune between stations. The voices jump in against the background. This method is fast becoming an institution in Germany. Out of a babble of background radio voices leaps a paranormal voice with possibly a familiar name. who is to say that the Germans are on the wrong track. Be flexible, but remain critical. Don't waste much time with diodes or similar devices, nor with noise generators. The former seem to lack dynamic energy. The latter cause such a roar that you will never be able to pick out the voice against the background. If the voice is so faint as to be almost inaudible, discard it and start again. If you're working in a small group, converse slowly with pauses. Request help from the unseen world. Sit for perhaps 10 minutes, then carefully examine the playback. But don't ascribe paranormality to coughs and grunts or the kids shouting in the street. Repeat the 10-minute process 3 times. The playback will take up most of the time. I have had amazing, loud, and unexplainable voices in small group experiments. An atmosphere of tense expectation should be avoided because it will abort results. Be calm, relaxed, meditative. Try the air band if you will. Look there for unexpected intrusions into pilot communications or the sudden appearance of anomalous voices, often speaking in foreign tongues. However, so far, few people have succeeded in duplicating my particular methods, just as I've failed to duplicate Jurgensen's medium waveband technique, and I've certainly never succeeded in obtaining over 50 voices in a 5-minute session, as Konstantin Raudive commonly experienced. I'm happy with 2 or 3 in a 10-minute session. Evidently, the unseen component fits the input to suit the location and your particular mentality. My own abilities appear to be returning after a long negative period. From all over the world, reports of successful experiments are now coming in, so there is room for optimism. I'm certain that the EVP is here to stay. Before Friedrich Jurgensen and Konstantin Raudive, the EVP was actually being reported in the United States of America. I have great hopes that the enterprise and the ingenuity and the resources of American workers and researchers will make enormous strides in the near future in the field of the EVP, carrying this work to new heights of achievement and stabilizing this much sought-after contact with the unseen intelligences behind the veil, the shifting veil of this material world.